This is part 3 of 3 with adjunct professor and lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania, Monda Mwaya. Here we discuss some factors of toxic workplace culture.
Some of the issue when we're dealing with our own people is that there is a kind of over familiarity issue there. And so
Mhm.
therefore, um, what happens all the time often is that there's an assumption that that person is going to have things in common with you. And so what happens, there's an assumption that they're going to have things in common with you, and vice versa. They think that you're going to have that, you feel that way about them as well. And so therefore sometimes you have to adjust to that initial disappointment that there are significant differences between the two of you, and maybe you guys actually don't have the same political, religious
Mhm.
views. Maybe the only thing that you guys have in common or can relate on is the fact that you both have had your experiences in this world as Black folks. Now, for some people, that's enough for them to join forces and say we can work out our differences. But
Mhm.
that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that, it's like, yeah, you would hope that people who look like you have the same ideas, but also people do respond and react to issues around like racism and discrimination different. Some
Mhm.
people, may take the route of fighting the system, and other people take the route of accommodating their life too, so they can, conform to the system. So one of
So
the things I wanted to talk
wait. So
about.
I'm sorry to
Mhm,
interrupt you. So are you
sure.
saying that maybe because the white woman as my supervisor is more culturally aware of what not to do? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is
Mhm.
that you and your supervisor may have found some common ground.
Mhm.
So maybe there's something about your work ethic that is allowing her to kind of tune out the bias that she may have. Like, she may still
Okay.
have her biases against you. She may
Mhm.
still have ideas around, but she may actually accept your work ethic as being like a common ground. Where I
Mhm.
feel like it's a little different when you are dealing with people who are just like you, because maybe even though both of you could appreciate, like both parties, even if they're from the same ethnic background, could appreciate their work ethics, for example, just like you had with your manager, but
Mhm.
they may actually not appreciate, let's say if they invited you somewhere.
Mhm.
Okay, so both of you could say, "Oh, I like Jamaican food." Let's say, for example, Jamaican food.
Mhm.
And and,
Mhm.
and she says, "I like Jamaican food." So, or he says he likes Jamaican food as well. That doesn't mean that you guys are going to want to go to the same restaurants.
No.
She could say she likes Jamaican food and she doesn't care where in the city she drives to go get
Mhm.
it. Where you say like, "Oh, I don't go down to those areas," or "There's some places I don't feel safe at," or "There's places that are too expensive," or whatever, or "That's not my taste," or "That's not my area." So when it comes down to it, those little differences could make that like, oh, because now the disappointed is that this disappointment is much higher because there was an assumed familiarity there. I don't think that your white manager is assuming familiarity. So
Mhm.
therefore, the first thing she's going to take is probably, oh, good work ethic. I could work with that, because she's not assuming that you guys have anything else in common. So she's not building herself up for any disappointment or letdown. Like for me, I hate having
Mhm.
um disingenuine connections with people at work, where
Mhm.
people assume that because there's certain things may have in common or
Right.
that we can relate to, that also means that we should be moving on to the next step, which
And
is
this is
exchanging friends and
and this
exchanging
is
phone
what
numbers
worked against
and
me.
sharing friends.
It's funny that you think like that because they thought I was snooty. That's the word she used.
Mm,
Because I was not willing to come down. Because with me, I am coming from corporate. You
right,
walk in, you do your job, and you leave. Okay.
right. Hmm.
But here there were friendships. There were, and this was very alien to me. And I mean, you and I got to know each other in a professional environment. Sometimes it
Yes,
works, sometimes it doesn't. But for
exactly.
my peace of mind, Raquel, I prefer not to. Okay.
Right,
Because when I go home, I don't want to think about my job. I don't want to think about whatever. I'll see you on Monday or we'll talk
right,
about it in the office.
right,
So for them, they didn't understand this.
right.
They didn't understand for them, I think I came off as standoffish and whatever negative things they could make
Because
up
there was
about.
this, they were disappointed because there was an assumed familiarity that was not there. And what it is when they tested it, for example, you can test it out in multiple ways. I've seen it happen for me in workplaces because I'm like that person as well, because for a few reasons, could be like my family's cultural background, my heritage is a non-American one. So it could be that. It could also be an issue around, so with that, cultural norms and certain foods are not necessarily foods that I necessarily want to eat. And so therefore, sometimes people who look like me and they hear me speak and they're like, oh, okay, well, you're just like, so again, that you sound just like me, right? So that assumes familiarity. If that person meets me for the first time, it's like, oh, well, you sound just like me, or you're from a neighborhood that I know that a lot of people who look like us live. Okay, we may have those things in common. But then you say something like, let's go to XYZ restaurant. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't eat that kind of food at all. And then there's that disappointment. So I think what it is there's a disappointment dynamic or disappointment piece that comes in, and you have to think about like what level of disappointment. You could be disappointing people greatly if you look like them because of that assumed familiarity, where again, like I said, with that white manager, there is not an assumed familiarity. So the slate is a little bit more clean because she's only expecting you, or he's only expecting you to be as you are. You're here to work. Well, I expect you to be a good person at work. I don't expect that just because you just said to me that you like Italian food, that you want to go to Italy every year. Like, maybe.
It's no. And that's a thing, because I can see with my Caucasian white supervisor, there is a certain level of respect. Recently, I had shared with you, I lost my mom, right?
I'm so sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, it's okay, and I showed up for a one-on-one because it happened on the day that we have a one-on-one, and I'm such a workaholic that I didn't know to cancel the meeting. I was like, nope, let me do my one-on-one, then I'll maybe take the day off, And you could just see the look in her eyes, like, Monda, it's okay for you to have time. Like, she was actually pushing me to take time off, And I could see the level of respect she has for me and my work ethic. You understand?
Of course.
So, because we have built that relationship over the months we've been working together, Right. And she was very stern in saying to me, you gotta grieve, take some days off, And I was like, wow. Meanwhile, my Black supervisor was telling me I'm too old to have a child. Do you remember this conversation?
Wow.
In our conversation? Wow. And
again, is that when you think about that familiarity, right? When you think about that, because a person making that comment, you would hope that this is a close family member, or maybe
or somebody who knows me, who has a relationship.
Like I'm saying, like your gynecologist or maybe your primary care provider saying that. But it's like a person who is like, we only know each other from work. Again, like I said, I go back to that familiarity. So I wanted to go into this real quick. If a person suspects that they're experiencing quiet bullying, there's some things that you can do about it. First and foremost, document everything. And the reason I wanted to segue is because I know this is going to spark some more conversation. Document everything. Keep a detailed record of incidences, including dates, times, and descriptions of what happened. Seek support. Talk to trusted colleagues, mentors, mental health professional about what you're experiencing. Confront the bully. Now, I will say this, be careful with confronting the bully. You do want to make sure that when you're confronting the bully, you are doing what is most beneficial for you, and it's going to give you the optimal response. And you don't need to confront the bully when you are about something that you don't even understand. For example, you could have a manager ask you to do something and you're taking it personal, but it's actually something that not only is in the scope of your role, but you could misplace your anger in the sense where maybe the reason why you weren't told that information or told that part of your job or your duties was because maybe it was somebody else's responsibility and they failed to, and your manager now is taking the heat because somebody else failed to tell you something, So like, you want to always make sure you have your information together before you confront the bully. But confront the bully if you feel like it's a safe and comfortable space to do that, to address these behaviors and be very direct with that individual. Sometimes they may realize the impact of their actions just by you confronting them. Report the behavior. Use the organization's formal channels of reporting to report bullying. This could be HR, supervisor, or
a very small
ombudsman.
place that had HR, everybody knew each other and they can hear everything. So for me,
can I say something to you? And I'm going to say this. It's funny that you're saying this. The most toxic environments to me are those smaller environments and those nonprofit and also for-profit organizations that profess to be doing kind of this selfless community-based work. I find those to be the most toxic environments.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why is because they are often practicing within a cultural understanding that there's some type of limitations, right? So whether it's limited resources, maybe limited staff, limited time frames. So
mind you, they all make 6 figures, and then they pay these people who have degrees less than 50,000.
Well, see, places like that, and I've worked at places like this before, where the only reason why I probably was seeing anything that was, I guess, a comfortable wage was just because I was a nurse. But outside of that, the people who were at the front desk who were doing phenomenal work. I mean, if they were ever out of work, you would feel it. Those individuals that you could not imagine turning and opening up for business in the practice, because these are these key individuals in the front desk. I've heard those individuals tell me about the kind of salaries that they're getting paid. And I would be out of my mind, because I'm like, when you are not at work, we can barely function. How can they be paying you so low? So yes, in those type of environments where things are scarce and there's issues around resources and just not a budget, but literally around resources. These are the kind of places where you just, your time, just like literally just put the date that you want to leave, the date on the calendar that you think you want to leave by, or you will stay if X, Y, Z conditions change, because these places oftentimes they're reading off of such a small, like, handbook. You know what I mean? What they're working off of is so tiny. Sometimes they're still trying to formulate the structure of their program. And because of that, you feel like the plane is being fixed as it's flying, right? Every day you feel like something is being tweaked. And so going to HR would be no different than just having a big meeting and bringing everybody together and telling them exactly how you feel. And sometimes more trauma happens in those types of environments, because of the fact that they're such a small organization. They believe, all right, you know what, let's practice some transparency. And so what winds up happening is they overpromise on transparency, and then they wind up having staff that have a higher expectation around transparency. And what happens is it backfires when they have things that they're being very private about, like lawsuits, or if they fines, or if there's something,
I think from what the lawyer told me, like, I still have time left to sue them. But I'm like, pondering, is it off the table? No,
but you do realize these places with these smaller, again, the reason why they are so toxic is there's so little people there to have that kind of positive influence, that the first people they decide that they're going to actually have is a bunch of frontline folks, and then have probably 1 or 2 middle management people, and everybody else are key decision makers who don't even really engage with frontline clients, or customers. So, again, it makes it harder when you want to actually confront these individuals. But one thing that I just listed here that was kind of making me a bit excited, and I wanted to hear from you on this, is about documenting everything. I'm really big on documenting everything.
Oh, I've learned that. Thank you. I have learned that. So
tell me, what's your experience been with documenting everything?
So now I have learned to document everything, because I also had another experience where I, this was also a new thing. I experienced some sexual harassment, and from the way that things were being handled, I was like, oh, let me make sure I have my backup plan, because from what I could see was that they were like, oh, this person is not going to be here long term. They're leaving anyway. So we'll just appease them and then toodaloo, you're done. We won't see you again. So they were not taking the right process with the other individual, because the other individual even was contacting me after I had brought this to HR, and this was a big corporation, Raquel. This was not a nonprofit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
To me, which was very unusual, because I would think that if someone told me someone is sexually harassing them, you would be explicit about communication, about making sure you remove the individual who is a predator out of the person's environment, right?
Not if they're a good worker. If they're a good worker, then it's about who is the more valuable staff member.
Okay.
Now, if coincidentally you were the more valuable, and I'm talking about you could be a female victim, and the person you went to report this was another female, and they are still going to look at you as, let's compare between. So if the person that did the harm, the person who's actually causing the harm happens to be the more valuable worker, then the lesser person is going to be the person, and they're going to try to either talk out of it or maybe start describing to you how the company handles it. And the company may handle it. See, in those kind of situations, the company could downplay what you reported.
Oh, they did, Raquel.
Without causing any tension. No, in your case,
they downplayed it to the point that they said I was flirting with the gentleman too.
Right, but what I'm saying is, in your situation, because you told me about this story, I know that other elements happened. So what happened is you knew the nature of what they didn't do because the behavior continued.
Yes.
And what I was saying is, in situations where they're supposed to handle these things, even if they did not really make a big thing of it and they try to downplay it, they could downplay it, and coincidentally the person never reached back out to you. And so therefore you may feel like you're in a safe space, but they still did not do what they needed to actually do. They just made you feel
because
safe
of that, Raquel,
it was a coincidence.
I'm going to make sure that I document it and put it in the right platforms.
There you go.
I'm going to put a Glassdoor review detailing what happened to me. I'm going to put an Indeed review, so that if somebody else is thinking of going to work for this company, their radar will be up. I think we need to utilize these platforms to let other people know this is not a place to go. Be mindful of what you're stepping in. Because for me, again, I thought, oh, this is a behavioral health company. Okay? They'll be better equipped than anybody else on how to deal with certain things. I was disappointed, Raquel. I was like, whoa. And because of having conversations with people like you and other professions that I know, I started documenting and even told the HR person, this conversation you and I are having, I'm recording it. You should have seen how quickly she changed the tone.
Can imagine. Because, and the reason why I was saying what I was saying earlier, a moment ago, about the coincidence, like if that person that coincidentally just did not reach back out to you, or they didn't engage with you anymore, and the behavior appeared to stop, you wouldn't have been any wiser, is because in a lot of these type of situations, that's what they're actually betting for it to kind of just go away, like not make it, like it just goes away. It's not going to be a big deal. So therefore they don't have to be the bad guy. They don't have to do anything to ruffle anybody's feathers. But again, all of these things wind up still being a problem when that person, after you leave, starts doing that to somebody else.
And he will, from the way
of course,
I heard from the people around who I had confided in. Oh yeah, he will. But that's why I need to put that Glassdoor review, so that if somebody needs to check out or whatever, I don't know. It's just very, us being Black in this certain roles, it's like, it's a double-edged sword, You go to work for a company where it's mostly minority and you're thinking you're going to be safe. Nope, your boss is a bully who is a Black woman, right? So it's crazy. And then you sit there and you're like, oh, but actually my white Caucasian boss was better than this. So what do we do? Or your fellow minority person is a sexual harasser. It's not funny, but it is. When you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to do? Just start our own companies and not work for anyone?
No, a lot of it is going back to that documentation. You have to have that support. You have to be able to back up your claims. You have to be able to say, even if coincidentally this person who caused this harm doesn't do it, I have all of these incidences that led up to this point documented. Because like I said, it could just be a coincidence that this person does not do anything, but they really never did anything about it. And so therefore, when you have that documentation, it is to help that company see patterns of behaviors and for them to really think,
I did. I sent them screenshots. Sent them screenshots, and that was thanks to you and your tutelage,
As we wrap up this conversation, one of the things that I really want to focus on is just the importance of having power. I think a lot of times people don't think about how much jobs that are toxic takes away your power. Today we were just talking about different elements of quiet bullying, but a lot of what happens in bullying is when someone takes that power away from you, where you feel like every conversation, and I know this for me, I listen to my body. So once I notice that I'm getting tensed, once that I know start getting the jitters, sometimes I can start my heart racing. I already know, okay, my body is telling me this is not something we can do all the time.
This is not
and we can't keep going through this. We can't keep going. This is something I can go into fight or flight, and that stress response, maybe let's say once, maybe twice a day. You're driving, maybe somebody slams their car, slams their brakes, and you're right behind them. Maybe, you don't hit but you're slamming your brakes, so you're caught off guard. Maybe your child is climbing on something, or maybe you see something that's about to tip over and fall, and you run after it to save it from falling. These are incidences that can happen once or twice, 3 times in a day. You cannot have that response activated 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can't. No. And so when you have workplaces in your work environment where, they're short staffed, they're still trying to grow, they're still trying to make their numbers and some. They may cut the staff in half and still want to make double the profits that they made the year before. And therefore, you are left there wondering, if I'm going to stay at this toxic environment and pay all my bills, or am I going to take the chance, take the leap of faith, save myself, because it won't matter what benefits they have or EAP program they have if I'm dead. And so the thing about it is the power, you take the power back by understanding the dynamics of your workplace. Take the power back by paying attention to the relationships that you see forming after events that happen. Things that maybe somebody did something was wrong to you at work, but you notice that after that situation happened, you maybe have 1 or 2 people that circle back to ask you how you're doing. And then you have some other folks that all of a sudden they stop talking to you. Unfortunately, in nursing, there's a lot of this. There's a saying that we have in nursing. I hate it. It's called nurses eating their young. But one of the things about it, it's this kind of culture around like initiating people or making people kind of earn their right to do something. And all of this comes at the cost of patients, because most of the time when nurses are going through these kind of like experiences, they wind up being so focused on their emotions, whether they're the person acting in these bad behaviors or whether they're the recipient of these bad actors. It winds up creating such personal tension that the focus is not on the patient, it's on the individual who's either causing the harm or the person that's a recipient. So again, going back to taking power is so important. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I have to agree with you in taking your power back. Taking your power back also was, I shouldn't have given notice. I should have just quit effective immediately. Certain places, they do not need notice. You just need to leave and never look back, because when you give them notice, you're giving them power to bully you. So from that incident, I learned that when something like that comes up, put in your effective immediately, and that's good as good, because you're not trying to go back there or work in the future. You're doing this for your mental health. You're doing this for your mental peace, and you can never get your time back. So definitely effective immediately should be the route, nothing less, nothing more. That's all I have to say. Thank you for having me. We always have these conversations, and I look forward to our next topic.
We want to hear from you. Schedule a free consultation or send us an email at advancednurses@acd4n.com or visit our websites www.advancednurses.info or www.acd4n.com.